The smell of freshly baked apple pie filled the kitchen of their Chicago brownstone as Sarah Mitchell carefully placed the dessert on the cooling rack. At 42, she had learned to find joy in small rituals like this, especially after the chaos of her nursing shifts at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Her hands, though marked with fine lines and the occasional age spot, moved with practiced grace as she wiped down the marble countertop. Through the kitchen window, she could see the October leaves dancing in the wind, painting Lincoln Park in shades of amber and crimson. It had been 3 years since she married Derek, her 34-year-old husband who worked as a financial consultant downtown. Their age difference had never bothered her, not when he pursued her so relentlessly at that charity gala, not when he proposed under the bean at Millennium Park, and certainly not during their intimate wedding at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Sarah heard the front door open and Derek's voice echoing through the hallway. He was on the phone, his tone casual and light. She smiled, expecting him to end his call and join her for the dinner she had been preparing all afternoon. But then she heard words that made her freeze in place. "My mom keeps asking when we are having kids," Derek said, his voice carrying that particular edge of annoyance Sarah had never heard directed at her before. "I keep dodging the question because honestly, I don't know if I want them with her." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the kitchen towel. She told herself she was misunderstanding, that perhaps he was talking about work, about some colleague. But her instincts, honed by years of reading people in hospital corridors, told her otherwise. "She's a great wife, don't get me wrong," Derek continued, his footsteps moving toward the living room. "But sometimes I look at her and I see my future, and it scares me. She's too old for me, wrinkled. When we're at events, people probably think she's my older sister or something. My buddies at the firm make jokes." The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Sarah's chest tightened as she processed what she was hearing. Her husband, the man who whispered sweet nothings in her ear just that morning, was talking about her like she was some burden, some mistake he was too polite to correct. "I love her, I do, but I wonder sometimes if I settled too soon. There are these young associates at work, mid-20s, full of life. Yesterday, this new girl, Amanda, was laughing at my jokes, touching my arm. Made me remember what it feels like to be wanted by someone who isn't worried about crow's feet and aging skin." Sarah's medical training kicked in, the same composure that helped her deliver bad news to families in emergency rooms. She quietly retrieved her phone from her pocket, opened the voice recorder app, and held it near the doorway. Her hands were steady now, driven by a cold clarity that pushed away the hurt. "My mom would kill me if she knew I felt this way," Derek laughed, that easy laugh Sarah had once found charming. "She loves Sarah. Thinks she's mature and stable and all that. But Mom doesn't have to wake up next to her every morning, you know? Doesn't have to see the wrinkles getting deeper, the body changing. I'm in my prime, man. Sometimes I feel like I'm wasting it." The recording captured every word, every casual cruelty delivered with the carelessness of someone who believed he was safe, unheard, unjudged. Sarah stood in that kitchen, surrounded by the domestic life she had built with such care, and felt something shift inside her. Not just heartbreak, though that was certainly there. It was something sharper, more focused. She had spent her entire adult life caring for others. As a daughter helping her aging parents through their final years, as a nurse holding the hands of the dying, as a wife who cooked favorite meals and ironed shirts and pretended not to notice when Derek checked out younger women at restaurants. She had made herself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, believing that was what love required. But standing there with that recording on her phone, Sarah understood something with crystal clarity. She had been participating in her own diminishment. Every time she laughed off a comment about her age, every time she worked extra hours to afford anti-aging creams she didn't actually care about, every time she second-guessed her worth because of the number of candles on her birthday cake, she had been complicit in teaching Derek that she was something to be ashamed of. Well, she thought, carefully stopping the recording and saving it to her files, class was now in session. And Derek was about to learn a very different lesson. Derek walked into the kitchen 20 minutes later, his phone call finished, his face relaxed and smiling. He kissed Sarah on the cheek with the same affection he always showed, completely unaware that everything had changed. "Hey babe, smells amazing in here," he said, loosening his tie and reaching for a glass of water. "What are we having?" "Pot roast with roasted vegetables," Sarah replied, her voice steady and warm, betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside her. "Your mother is coming over for dinner tomorrow night. I thought we could have a nice family meal." Derek's expression flickered for just a moment, something like discomfort crossing his features before he masked it with enthusiasm. "Oh, that's great. Mom loves your cooking. You know she's always saying how lucky I am." Sarah nodded, continuing to prepare the table settings. She had already made her decision. Tomorrow night would be the performance of her lifetime, and she needed Derek relaxed, unsuspecting, completely unprepared for what was coming. That night, as they lay in bed, Derek reached for her hand in the darkness. Sarah let him hold it, studying the ceiling and wondering how many other nights he had touched her while thinking about younger women, fresher skin, a different life. The intimacy that once felt safe now felt like a violation, each moment of tenderness revealed as a lie by his recorded words. The next day moved with agonizing slowness. Sarah went through her nursing shift at the hospital on autopilot, her mind rehearsing what she would say, how she would say it. Her colleague Jennifer noticed her distraction during their lunch break in the hospital cafeteria. "You okay, Sarah? You seem somewhere else today." "Just thinking about dinner tonight," Sarah replied, which was true, if incomplete. She stopped by her bank during her break, making arrangements she should have made months ago. Then she visited her lawyer, an old friend from college who specialized in family law. She explained the situation calmly, clinically, as if discussing someone else's marriage. Her lawyer listened, took notes, and promised to have preliminary paperwork ready within days. By the time Sarah returned home that evening, she had transformed her pain into something sharper and more useful, a plan. She set the dining room table with their wedding china, the expensive set Derek's mother had given them as a gift. She lit candles, arranged fresh flowers from the corner market, and prepared a meal worthy of a magazine spread. Derek arrived home with his mother, Patricia, an elegant woman in her 60s who had always treated Sarah with genuine warmth and respect. They exchanged hugs at the door, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt knowing what was about to happen. But then she remembered Derek's words, his casual cruelty, his willingness to mock her to his friends while accepting her devotion. The guilt evaporated. Dinner began with pleasant conversation. Patricia complimented the pot roast, asked about Sarah's week at the hospital, and shared stories about her book club's latest drama. Derek sat relaxed in his chair, occasionally squeezing Sarah's hand under the table, playing the role of devoted husband with practiced ease. Sarah waited until they had finished the main course, until the wine had been poured and everyone was settled into that comfortable post-meal contentment. Then she stood, her phone in her hand, and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the sideboard. "Before we have dessert, I want to share something," Sarah said, her voice calm and clear. "Derek, your mother has been so kind to me over these 3 years. She welcomed me into this family without hesitation, never once made me feel like I was too old for her son, never questioned our love." Patricia smiled warmly. "Of course, dear. You make Derek happy. That's all a mother wants." Sarah nodded, then looked directly at her husband. His face showed mild curiosity, nothing more. He had no idea what was coming. "I thought it would be good for your mother to hear how you really feel about me. About us. About this marriage." She pressed play. Derek's voice filled the dining room, tinny but unmistakable through the speaker. "She's too old for me, wrinkled. When we're at events, people probably think she's my older sister or something. My buddies at the firm make jokes." The color drained from Derek's face. He lunged forward, reaching for the phone, but Sarah stepped back, letting the recording continue. Patricia sat frozen, her wine glass halfway to her lips, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. I love her, I do, but I wonder sometimes if I settled too soon. There are these young associates at work, mid-20s, full of life. Yesterday, this new girl, Amanda, was laughing at my jokes, touching my arm. Mom, I can explain, Derek started, his voice desperate now, but Patricia held up her hand, silencing him. Her eyes were fixed on the speaker, listening to every cruel word her son had spoken. My mom would kill me if she knew I felt this way. She loves Sarah. Thinks she's mature and stable and all that. But Mom doesn't have to wake up next to her every morning, you know? Sarah stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia slowly set down her wine glass, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at her son with an expression Sarah had never seen before, something between disappointment and disgust. If you've stayed with me this far through this story, watching Sarah find her strength, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next, the way she reclaims her power and her life, is just beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Patricia stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She walked around to where Derek sat, his face buried in his hands, and for a moment Sarah thought she might comfort him. Instead, Patricia's hand connected with her son's cheek in a sharp slap that echoed through the dining room. I raised you better than this, Patricia said, her voice shaking with fury. Your father and I taught you to respect women, to honor your commitments, to be a man of integrity. And this is what you've become? Someone who mocks his wife to his friends? Someone who fantasizes about younger women while his wife cooks him dinner and supports his career? Derek looked up, his cheek red, tears forming in his eyes. Mom, please, I was just venting. I didn't mean half of what I said. You meant every word, Sarah interjected, her voice steady and cold. And even if you didn't, the fact that you could say those things, that you could reduce me to wrinkles and age spots while I've given you nothing but loyalty and love, tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. She walked to the sideboard and retrieved an envelope she had placed there earlier. Inside were documents her lawyer had prepared, photographs of text messages she had found on Derek's iPad that afternoon between him and Amanda from work, flirtatious exchanges that confirmed everything the recording had suggested. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Sarah continued, placing the envelope on the table in front of Derek. I've opened a separate bank account and transferred half of our joint savings, which is legally mine. I've contacted a real estate agent about selling this house. And I've packed your belongings. They're in the garage. Derek's face went from red to pale. You can't just kick me out. This is my house too. Actually, Patricia said, her voice icy, this house is in my name. I bought it as a wedding gift with the understanding that you two would build a life here together. But since you've decided to treat your marriage as a temporary inconvenience while you shop for someone younger, I'm giving Sarah full use of it until you finalize your divorce. Derek stared at his mother in disbelief. You're choosing her over me? Your own son? I'm choosing decency over cruelty, Patricia replied. I'm choosing a woman who has shown me nothing but kindness over a son who has apparently forgotten every value I tried to instill in him. You want to chase 25-year-olds? Fine. But you'll do it from a studio apartment, not from the home I provided. Sarah felt something break loose inside her chest, not more pain but its opposite, liberation. For 3 years she had twisted herself into shapes designed to keep Derek happy, had second-guessed every wrinkle and gray hair, had made herself smaller to accommodate his ego. Derek tried one more time, his voice breaking with desperation. Sarah, please. Can we talk about this privately? I made a mistake. I was stupid. I love you. We can go to counseling, we can fix this. Sarah looked at the man she had married, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not the charming suitor who had swept her off her feet, not the husband she had imagined him to be, but the insecure man-child who needed to diminish her to feel powerful, who measured his worth by the youth of the women who desired him. Derek, there's nothing left to fix, she said quietly. You didn't make a mistake. You revealed who you are. And I deserve better than someone who sees my age as a character flaw, who views my love as something to be ashamed of. I spent 3 years trying to be enough for you, erasing myself a little more each day. But I'm done shrinking. She walked to the front door and opened it, the October evening air rushing in cool and clean. Derek looked to his mother one more time, but Patricia had turned away from him, her arm around Sarah's shoulders in a gesture of unmistakable solidarity. You should leave now, Patricia said to her son, her voice firm. Sarah and I will finish dinner without you. Derek stood slowly, defeated, and walked toward the door. As he passed Sarah, he tried one last time. The guys at work, Amanda, none of that meant anything. You're overreacting. Sarah felt Patricia tense beside her, ready to defend her again, but she didn't need defending anymore. She had found her own voice, her own strength. I'm not overreacting, Sarah said, meeting his eyes without flinching. I'm reacting appropriately to being disrespected and betrayed. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that tells me everything about why this marriage was doomed from the start. Derek left without another word, the door closing behind him with a finality that felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. Patricia pulled Sarah into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so ashamed of what he said, what he did. Sarah let herself be held for a moment, then pulled back and wiped her eyes. You have nothing to apologize for. You raised him right. He chose to be something else. They returned to the dining room, and Sarah brought out the apple pie she had baked the day before, when she still believed her marriage was real. They ate in companionable silence for a while, two women processing the wreckage of an evening that had changed everything. You know what the worst part is? Sarah said finally. I actually believed him when he said my age didn't matter. I believed him when he said I was beautiful. I let myself be convinced that I was lucky he chose me. Patricia reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. You are beautiful. And he was lucky. He just wasn't smart enough to know it. 18 months later, Sarah sat on the back porch of the Chicago brownstone, now fully hers after the divorce settlement, watching the spring flowers bloom in the garden she had planted that winter. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, filled with her own choices rather than compromises designed to please someone else. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, who had remained close despite everything. They met for brunch every Sunday, a tradition that had become one of Sarah's favorite parts of the week. The message contained a photo of Patricia with her new book club, all of them holding copies of a memoir about women reclaiming their lives after 50. Thought of you when we picked this one, the text read, followed by a heart emoji. Sarah smiled and was typing a response when her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Jennifer, her colleague from the hospital, standing there with coffees and that knowing grin she always wore when she had gossip to share. You're not going to believe who I saw at Starbucks this morning, Jennifer said, handing Sarah a latte as they settled onto the porch furniture. Let me guess. Derek? Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. With someone who looked barely old enough to rent a car. She was complaining loudly about how he never wants to go out anymore, how he's always tired, how he acts like an old man. The irony was beautiful. Sarah laughed, surprised to find that it didn't hurt anymore. The anger had burned itself out months ago, leaving behind something cleaner, indifference. Derek had become a character in a story she used to tell about herself, no longer the author of her narrative. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier. Derek had fought for the house, tried to claim Sarah had manipulated his mother, attempted to paint himself as the victim. But the recording, combined with the text messages and testimony from his own colleagues about his inappropriate behavior with Amanda, had made the proceedings mercifully swift. Sarah had thrown herself into her work at the hospital, eventually accepting a promotion to head nurse in the cardiac unit. She had started taking art classes on weekends, joined a hiking group that explored trails around Lake Michigan, and discovered that she genuinely enjoyed her own company in ways she never had when she was constantly trying to be what someone else wanted. Her hair had more gray now than it did 18 months ago. The lines around her eyes had deepened. And she had never felt more beautiful, more powerful, more completely herself. "So," Jennifer said, leaning back in her chair, "any interest in getting back out there? Dating again?" Sarah considered the question, watching a cardinal land on the feeder she had installed last month. "Maybe eventually. But right now, I'm enjoying falling in love with myself first. Turns out, I'm pretty good company." Jennifer raised her coffee cup in a toast to being too old, too wrinkled, and too smart to settle for less than we deserve. Sarah clinked her cup against Jennifer's, smiling at the echo of Derek's words transformed into a badge of honor. "To being exactly who we are," she said. "And never apologizing for it again." Thank you so much for staying with Sarah's story until the very end. If her journey of reclaiming her power and dignity resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought about this story, and if you have suggestions for future videos, I'd love to hear them. What kind of stories do you want to see next? Stories of revenge, redemption, unexpected kindness, or second chances? Let me know, and I'll bring them to life. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.